Tonight, a story so disturbing, it left an entire community asking one question. How could a father do this? Now, on New Year's Day in 2021, 33-year-old Daniel Wangondu was found brutally murdered just outside his home in Nyeri. Police quickly pieced together a trail of phone calls, money, and hired hitmen and pointed the finger at someone no one expected, his own father, Stephen Wangondu. Detectives claimed he orchestrated the killing for insurance money and, in whispers, even more shocking, so he could take his son's wife as his own. But in court, no evidence ever proved those accusations. They became the most expensive lies, lies that destroyed Stephen Wangondu's reputation, his dignity, and his family's name even in death. This is a case where truth and rumor collide. A family's private struggles exposed, a patriarch's empire shaken, and a son's life ended at the dawn of a new year. But when the killers are taken to court, we get more shocked. I am Brian Obuya. This is Murder Tapes, where we realize that the truth is buried in the evidence. To kill a son starts now. January 1st, 2021, in Nyeri County. A man is found brutally murdered outside his own home. His name, Daniel Mwangi Wangondu. Just 33 years old. For detectives, the brutality is clear, but the motive, now. That will shake this community to its core.
So mimi naamkia kwenda job kuchukua stock. Nashanga watu wananiangalia, je, wananihepa. Ai, ni nini mbaya? Mimi sina idea. So mimi napigiwa simu na one of my friends anaitwa Tabitha Omuiga. Ananiambia, "Hi Dafri, uko aje?" Uko job, niko job of course. Nasikia mwongea alichapwa club. We, nasikia alichapwa vibaya, mimi nikatense, juu najuanga yeye ni wa vita. So mimi nikashindwa. Okay, alichapwa wapi? Canopy ama tent? Nasikia yuko poa. Ati naenda kwa gate ya kwako amelemewa. So mimi niko zile za maybe alimix beer. Na si mara ya kwanza alikuwa analemewa kwa gate, mimi naenda nachukua gari na ipark na mwambia atoke sasa polepole tunaenda kwa nyumba. So sikuona ikiwa issue big, but amechapwa. Nikakimbia mbio kwa tent kwa club ya Ben kwenda kujua kuliendaje, ndio ni rush kwenda kwa home nijue kama nitampeleka hosi ama.
Daniel had been ambushed as he came home at dawn. He didn't stand a chance. Detectives considered robbery, but nothing was stolen. Whoever came for Daniel came for him. The way the attack was carried out, it was targeted. Whoever planned this wanted him silenced. Hours before the tragic event, Daniel, his wife, and his siblings had planned to visit their mother, Scholastica Washuka. She is Stephen Wangondu's second wife, with whom they had been estranged for 13 years.
And actually, I was preparing to go to Nyahururu, because we were to meet with Daniel and other family members at Nyahururu. That is at my stepmother's place. She had actually invited us for a get-together.
Also coming with the boys to Nyahururu was Frida Njeri, Daniel Wangondu's wife. But at this time, she was staying at a separate house next to her father-in-law. She was not in good terms with Daniel, her husband. She has declined an on-camera interview, saying she's yet to fully move on from that tragedy.
Mwangi alikuwa amenipigia simu that night, hiyo date that first. Akaniambia, hi, how are you? How have you been? And Jasmine, she's fine. So, Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Kisha tunaenda kwa madhe. Alikuwa anapenda kuniingiza box hivyo, naenda home. Kisha tunaenda kwa madhe, unaonaje? Akamwambia, of course, why not? Tuende mama. My first born alikuwa kwa shosh Nyahururu. So akaniambia Happy New Year na uslip mapema, kisha tunaenda Nyahururu.
That statement and the previous one tells you that Daniel was arguably a violent man. He had his tempers and unique grandiosity. He was in charge, whether at a club or a function.
Going to enter the car, actually to drive to Muiga, and then I proceed to Nyahururu, is when I received a phone call from my dad. So, of course, the way he called me, I knew something was amiss from the tone of his voice. So he told me that, Elijah, I would want you to come to Mwangi's place. Now, my brother, Daniel Mwangi, urgently come. There is something that has happened that is not right. So I wouldn't really tell what it was. So I just drove. In fact, I did not take my family with me. So I actually left them and drove to Webiga. That's where my late brother had been given a parcel of land by my father, and that's where he had settled. So I went, I drove all the way to my late brother's home. So I went, as usual, very fast. Then, of course, as I was approaching his home, is where I met a crowd of people. Then I knew something must be amiss. And of course, when I went, I was received by my father. He was with a few neighbors there, is when they told me on what had happened. So I also went and just saw my late brother, of course, lying down, of course, dead, because he had also been covered with a blanket and, of course, blood. So meaning that he had just been, killed. So I was very shocked. So I remember that really disturbed me, and the first person I thought of calling is actually my sister, but I was not really able to break the news to her immediately. So it was very sad and very shocking. Yeah. So that's how that's how I came to know that my brother actually had been killed. He had deep cuts on the face, blood was there, just as the gate. And of course, I also found his vehicle had been parked. So from what I gathered is that he was actually trying to open the gate to his home.
As investigators dug deeper into his killing, they began piecing together a disturbing chain of events. Phone records, witness accounts, a driver with suspicious movements, and whispers of a family feud boiling over. Stephen Wangondu had responded to her daughter-in-law's cry for help after her husband had threatened to kill her, uncovering a troubled private life that complicated the story. At the center of it was his marriage to Frida. Their relationship, strained and volatile, had reached a breaking point. Daniel had threatened her, sending chilling words in a text to her sister. If Frida doesn't move out, one of us will die. It was a message that revealed just how toxic their home had become.
tulikuwa tu na ile tu domestic violence ya kawaida. So nikaona Mwangi juu alikuanga wa hasira. Nikaona tu nimpeka break. Alikuanga tu na tu hasira kidogo, kisha mwenenga ako sawa. So mimi juu niko na baby ka small, that time Jasmine was 1. So nikapiga actually alikuwa ameandikia sistangu message. Akamwambia sistangu akamwambia but tell Frida to move out of my house or else you bury me or her. So my sister called me. Akaniambia if possible you can just leave that house, you go to your dad's place or else you go to near town, you get a house. So kama wewe ungefanya nini? And it was around 10. Nikapigia dad.
The late Stephen.
Yes. Nikamwambia dad, I'm not okay, can you just come for us? Alikuwa anajua Mwangi venye alikuwa na hasira. So he came for us and then tukakaa kwake.
And at the same time, Daniel was living a double life. Away from his home in the town of Mwega, he was keeping another relationship, a concubine who symbolized the fracture between his words and his vows. Please remember her. Mwangi had given her one part of his heart, so much so that she is the last person to have spoken with Mwangi up to the minute he was being killed. It painted a picture of a man wrestling with infidelity, anger, and control. His marriage was collapsing, and his personal choices were fueling the storm. Despite all this, Frida still swears in the name of the man. She misses him and describes him as the only man who truly ever loved her.
Nasikia tu sina energy. I'm so much emotional. It's never easy. I'm still in disbelief up to now.
But it was not just Frida who was loved. In the eyes of many, Daniel too was loved. Maybe not as much as he loved Frida.
I believe, in fact, he was the favorite son. He had been given even a place to settle his family. Unlike as the others of the sons, we actually looked for our own places to settle. Him being the last born, they stayed with my father. He was loved. In fact, we used to feel like he's getting more favors than we are. Yeah, he was assisting him in learning his businesses and all that. Yeah. So he was the most loved. So I don't think Dad would have gone to that extent. Again, he was even protecting the family. When Mwangi had issues with the wife, my dad stepped in, at least to even assist the family, even to house them, to set up a business for the wife. I mean, he loved the entire family, Mwangi, the wife, and the children, and Mwangi's children included. Yeah. But I believe if there was a misunderstanding that took place, I believe Mwangi was incited, maybe to have those differences with my dad. Remember when my father separated with my stepmom, my other sisters and brother, they followed mom, but Mwangi remained with my dad all those years. Yeah. So I believe there was. I don't believe there would have been a reason, even if they had differences. I don't believe Dad would have gone to that extent. I believe there are people who saw maybe there is a difference and came in to then take advantage of other things.
Dada alipenda Mwangi hapo. Hapo Mwangi alipendwa. Hata every time nilikuwa namwambia, "Mi dad, nataka nienda kwetu siko poa huku kwako. Sasa niende tu kwetu kwanza ni relax mind. Ananiambia hapana, mimi sitaki aibu mtoto wangu aonekane alitupa familia. You know, alikuwa try kucover sana. Mwangi wake asionekane ametupa nini familia. So kama hakumpenda angenichase, ndio?
With Frida and Daniel undergoing a strained union, Daniel's father, Stephen Wangondu, visited a psychiatrist believing that his last-born son was not okay. He could no longer take in the shame that Daniel was bringing to the family and the imminent harm he might cause himself. He needed supervision.
Daktari akamwambia, I think Mwangi ako na shida. Mwangi angesota angekuwa na hasira mingi sana. Akisota alikuwa mtu wa do, so angesota tu kidogo. Alikuwa na anga, which is kawaida for every man.
Is it?
Yeah, it's kawaida for every man, ndio?
Mimi saizi nimesota.
Mwangi kama hana do. Alikuwa na anga sana. So, daktari akasema hiyo si kawaida. I think he needs a close supervision. So what daddy did, akaenda kafunga home kwetu kwangu kwenye tumejenga na Mwangi. Akafunga instead of hata approach. Alifanya vibaya hapo sana by the way. Akaenda akafunga kwetu na ndio Mwangi aende kwake. Nao tukaange na yeye. Kukaa alikuwa amenipea wenye Mwangi alikuwa anaishi kitambo. So alikuwa na nyumba hapo chini kuna 2 bedrooms. So akuja kae na sisi. Hata kama si na sisi kuna rooms mingi. Si alikuwa na nyumba kubwa sana. Because of close supervision. Juu hayuko sawa mentally. According to the doctor.
It was then that Daniel Wangondu stormed into a petrol station in Mwega, where his father was present, and attacked him brutally.
So Mwangi was angry. Akajam, why? Mbona ufungia kwangu? I'm no longer a kid. So that's why akamchapa. So wanasemanga ati juu yangu mimi nashindwa juu yangu aje. So because how ilikuwa imefungwa hivyo tu, nothing more. Sasa sikumbuki kuliendaje, but Mwangi hakuwa kuja kwetu.
Azini kuja mzee alikuwa.
Hakuwa kuja kwa mzae. So sisi tukabaki tu kwa babu until I cool down.
There was a push and pull for Mzee and Mwangi. Because Mwangi claims that Mzee had many wives. According to him, that is what Mwangi told me. The day he was trying to beat up Mzee, he told me that Mzee had many wives. That is why he was not happy with Mzee. He told me that Mzee was trying to take away the farm that he had given him. He told me that Mzee was assisting the wife and had taken the wife. That is what he told me. And he told me that he was ready to kill Mzee. He himself told me that. And his uncle was there, the brother to the mother, and was trying to tell him, no, don't do that, and don't talk or anything like that. Mwangi used to take some beers. One of his friends told me that even after taking beers, he would take some cookies, drugged cookies. That is why he had acted in such a way.
The beating left the elder Wangondu frail and shaken, forcing him to make a desperate call to his eldest son, Elijah.
No,
It's true.
It's true.
And go for it.
Set food. Mogo do use your no ake. Na diagi you never set food on it. Na teo di kwenda confrontation nire. Ni kwa bago kirogo. They very wounded at the heart.
Yes.
You do a piece of your kid. You do that do a mateo. And every day I don't know to where I need a get off. So the Nigua agi to it. That was as a matter of information.
Yes.
Just in case. Go get you work. Na mwagine tare moguru. Na niko machia kweke otodo na komare. Iki gaga kumenya ido amugo. ndakwira uguo as my other son.
Yes.
Na niwo wali no gutugo atwacio just in case. Eto tokire mukuru.
Niguo.
Nikio ndakwira maundu macio. Riu ni nginyite gutuka feta na mwana kiocio. Mabere ni undu wa maundu macio. Na I'm sorry Nina ndari ajazia. Na ni makiaregia. Mari zatwaria nake umuthi mbere akwaririe ezo did display ni na mo ono rega auga ati ndamwitire stupid na kigo stupid ni ko describe to character mundu
niguo
ongeza kumuhurira simu like the brother
akare ndamuhurire tari oya mutumira message tari acokia no ngukugeria kumuhurira still
na wera ayanyina na wera John neko muhurira tano ya thimu riu mwagire atika ake na maundu matari mega
niguo
either he is mentally sick leo ti excuse kugagira gwa ni muroru atwa thibitari.
It's true.
Ni maundu maria areka na ndangietererwo ageka maundu macio akoreteire tugeka uguo nigetha tumenye ni murwaru tondu ciiko iria yakana ni kira arata keri ikiramuteithia na makamutara uria kwagithire but still daragwa to uri mwana wakwa iri thambi
niguo
na uri menta wa andu aciaki
ni maniguo
aguthikiriria kana ikare ukigira kana akwira atia
niguo
tondu iyo ni opposition and the same stars now mwagine de murumete uguo ajikite mbere ya andu na agathie na mbere he is no longer
and it is that red line that had ostensibly announced the final battle between Wang'ondu Sr. and his last-born son, Daniel Wang'ondu. Court records would later show he then tasked his driver, James Mahinda, to bring Daniel back to his senses.
So Stephen Wang'ondu hired or engaged James Mahinda and told him, I need you to get me 2 able persons to teach my son a lesson. That's the exact wording of what is in the court file. So Mahinda traveled to Embu, got into contact with a friend of his known as Geoffrey Warutumo.
That Warutumo owned a shop in Embu and was a friend to James Mahinda. Warutumo says James asked from him men who could work in a quarry crushing stones.
Warutumo introduced Mahinda to a gentleman known as Eddie Kariuki. Eddie Kariuki then called my client, Raphael Washira, and the instructions were given that you need to go to Nyeri and you need to teach this particular person a lesson.
Eddie Kariuki and Raphael Washira say they were given 1,000 Kenya shillings as lunch money. After taking lunch, they were driven around Nyeri looking for their target. It was then that James Mahinda pointed at Daniel Wang'ondu, telling the duo that he was their target. He also showed them the maroon Volkswagen that he would probably be driving. The vehicle was registered as KAR 303P. Mahinda then took them to a hardware where he bought them metallic rods, a knife, and gloves to discipline Daniel. He then drove them to the driveway at his home and left them lying in wait at 6 p.m. the previous day. They say it was about 2:30 a.m. when they saw lights approach.
Daniel Wang'ondu left. He had a pub in Muiga, so he left and went home and was on phone with his girlfriend. Can't remember the name. So he spoke to her to a point when he got to the gate and he told her, let me open the gate. And as soon as he went back to the car, the lady says that the last she heard of his boyfriend was screams and shouts for help. And the phone call lasted about 2 minutes before it got hung up.
The person Advocate Ndishu is talking about is the same girlfriend that I told you to take note of. Her name is Charity Modhoni Musheru. She lived in the same vicinity as Mwangi, his wife Frida, and their families. She told the court she was on call with Daniel, but she did not visit the scene or attend the burial. She told the tense courtroom that Daniel's wife, Frida Njeri, had threatened not to see her face anywhere.
So according to my client, in the confession or in the plea bargain that he entered into, he indicated that they waylaid him at around 1 a.m. on 1st of January 2021. My client hit him with a blunt object, and Eddie Kariuki unfortunately stabbed him several times, and they left him for dead. They then left there, went and threw away the murder weapons in a nearby river. And they all relocated to different places and were later arrested by the police.
To understand the case, detectives had to look at the man at the center of it all, Stephen Wangondu, Daniel Mwangi's father. To the outside world, he lived like a king behind his gates. He owned a mansion, petrol stations, a stone crusher, and farmland stretching hundreds of hectares. A man of wealth, power, and seclusion. But behind those walls, life was more complicated. Stephen had 2 known wives and even a nurse who bore him a child. 7 children in total. His second wife, Scholastica Washuka, the mother of Daniel Mwangi, had been estranged from him for 13 years. Yet, despite the distance, he never severed ties between children in his 2 marriages. However, it is this second family that his advocate, Mahugu Mbarire, has told the court in a hotly contested succession case that Stephen wanted to disinherit. To his community, Stephen was a man who had it all. But those who lived under his shadow knew his household was divided. Seclusion defined his life. His wealth kept everything stitched together, but not without strain. What no one saw then was that the cracks inside his kingdom would soon shatter in the most unimaginable of ways. When Daniel was killed, police came for Stephen Wangondu, arresting the man sometime in February 2021, a month after the brutal murder.
I was at home. Then my brother David, my warrior, he's the one who follows me. He called me on the 20th of February 2021. Then he told me Dad has been arrested. So to be sincere, I didn't even know he's been arrested in connections with Daniel's death. To be very sincere. But now David told me that Dad has been arrested, but in the morning there was a word going around that he will be arrested due to Daniel's death. In fact, not even in the morning, the previous day. And why he would be arrested is in connections to Daniel's death. And the person who was spreading the word was my sister-in-law. That's the wife to Mwangi. So that is what, in fact, I came to know that story from David, my brother, on that day. He's the one who told me, but Dad he was okay. I mean, he was not even fearing that arrest. So and that's why I always doubt that my father would have been involved in the death of my brother, because actually, naturally, I think he would have maybe tried to hide or something. And we were free with him, maybe he would have even told me. So it caught me by surprise.
If he did it through impunity, I would have expected him to use the wealth to block the justice. He would have been smart enough to use his monies to say, now, how much do you need for this? That is what happens. And that is something he didn't do, because probably being innocent, he thought that things were running smoothly, and until when he was able to get grounded, because if he was able to be there now, he would have been giving his side of the story, which we were waiting for.
In due course, police would arraign Stephen Wang'ondu Kinini, James Mahinda Mwangi, Eddie Kariuki Ngari, Raphael Washira Kariuki, and Geoffrey Warutumo Waturi to stand trial for the murder of Daniel Mwangi Wang'ondu. On the 12th of April, the High Court at Nyeri released the accused on bail. But here are two disturbing occurrences. Stephen Wang'ondu Kinini was released on bond. That bond was in form of a parcel of land belonging to Paul Kuria Mwaura. But it was interesting to learn that a lawyer had started a WhatsApp group and began collecting hundreds of thousands from family and friends to ostensibly pay cash bail for Stephen Wang'ondu. To this date and time, no one knows where those monies went. The other thing was Stephen himself. His whereabouts on the 21st of April 2021 are unknown. The Nyeri Maximum Prison in Kingongo says he was taken for treatment. The hospital, on the other hand, says it never admitted or attended to the man. Where Stephen Wang'ondu was remains a mystery. But after that day, Mr. Stephen Wang'ondu lost his speech and stability. He never spoke again. 7 days later, he was released from prison, but was sickly and was admitted in hospital. And 9 days later, he was dead. In short, Stephen Wang'ondu never made it home again after his arrest. 2 months earlier, on the 2nd of March 2021, Stephen Wang'ondu's driver, 42-year-old James Mahinda, took plea, pleading guilty to a reduced charge of neglect to prevent a felony.
I disagree with the applicant.
3 months later, Lady Justice Florence Moshemi sentenced Mahinda to 1 year in prison and 1 year non-custodial sentence. And that sentence was to commence on the arrest date, 4 months before the sentence. With Stephen dead, Mahinda sentenced, it was now Eddie, Raphael, and Warutumo to face the court. Geoffrey Warutumo would then be discharged to become a state witness. The case then became too tough for Eddie Kariuki and Raphael Washira. Eddie Kariuki was born in 1999 in Embu as the 8th born in a family of 10. He dropped out of school in class 5 to join the booming miraa business, an emerging threat to education in miraa growing regions. This mark-timing tragedy was recently highlighted in an NTV special report, Cut Off School, as pieced together by Margaret Kimathi. The report had shown that over 40,000 children in Embu and Meru had abandoned school for miraa growing business. And one of them, it would appear, is Eddie Kariuki. Eddie says he was promised a job in a quarry by Mahinda where they would be paid 30,000 per week. Quite a job, that one. Then Mahinda changed the job to the murder of Daniel Mwangi Wangondu. For Raphael Washira, he was born in 1987 as the firstborn of 3 children. He dropped off school in class 7. The man from Ngarweri in Iriatune still denied committing the crime. He says he was framed because of his close association to Eddie Kariuki. Upon being convinced, the duo agreed to a plea bargain, pleading guilty to the crime in exchange of a lenient sentence. I hope you follow that by now, of the 5 accused persons, Stephen Wangondu is dead. James Mahinda has pleaded guilty 2 years ago and has been sentenced. Geoffrey Warutumo has been discharged as an accused person and is now a state witness. Eddie Kariuki and Raphael Washira, the 2 remaining accused persons, have now agreed to a plea bargain and pleaded guilty to the crime. Now, unlucky for them, Justice Kizito Magare had applied his mind to the weight of the case and sentenced Eddie Kariuki to 25 years in prison because a probation officer said he was remorseful. The court in Nyeri sentenced Raphael Washira to 30 years in prison. But I don't know why in his sentence, Justice Kizito Magare says no one will miss Raphael. Now, Murder Tapes would like you to see at this point that there was more to the killing of Daniel Mwangi Wangondu and the prosecution of the 5 people. The tenets of the law of evidence show that police had nothing on the 5 people. There were no eyewitnesses, no fingerprints, no digital money transfers, no cameras, and no suspicious conversations. So, I ask Advocate Ndishu, if he was a prosecutor in this case, what would be the problem with the case minus the confessions?
I think the most difficult thing as a prosecutor would be to connect all these 5 accused persons, because really there is no direct connection between Stephen Kinini, Raphael Washira, and Eddie Kariuki. As a matter of fact, I do not know if they saw each other or even spoke on phone. So that would be difficult to create that relationship. But then it would be made better by the fact that James Mahinda was in direct contact with Eddie Kariuki and Raphael Washira on phone. They spoke on phone severally before and after the incident.
And that is just it.
Was a driver to my father, yeah? And one of the things that he said, the fact that he was driving my father's car at night. I hear that he's the one who was transporting the hired gang to go and kill my brother. That was the connection. But then, even before that, Mahinda used to drive my father's vehicle at night, any time of the day. So I don't believe it was not an isolated case. Even if he drove at night, I mean, he would drive so many times, other times. So that was the connection. And then I hear 160,000 was sent to Mahinda, 160,000. Yeah, he used to be sent money even before that. And then you see my dad, the fact that, okay, he had, the way he used to give Mahinda, I think he had trusted him. Take this phone, M-Pesa, just do the PIN. I believe he even knew my father's PIN. So he'll just send the money. So it's only the 160,000. And maybe the fact that Mahinda was driving the vehicle, my dad's vehicle at night. That is the connection. Yeah. But my father had never admitted that he killed Mwangi or he even hired the gang. Yeah.
There was never evidence adduced in court or elsewhere to even suggest that these four people met or spoke with Stephen Wangondu about punishing or killing his son. The only evidence was the admission of James Mahinda. When motive was questioned, the police said that Wangondu wanted his son dead so he could claim insurance. But no evidence was brought to court. In fact, when the police tried using that line to deny Mr. Wangondu bail, Justice Florence Mushemi dismissed it. In assembling their evidence, detectives claimed that the murder weapon was recovered, listen to this, by the members of the public in a nearby river. That river is about 5 kilometers away, but that is not the problem. The problem is, how did members of the public recognize this as the weapon that killed Mwangi? And then there was the last problem, but far more important than anything else: James Mahinda, the driver. The court sentenced Mahinda to 1 year in prison, that he was guilty of negligent homicide. Troubled by this finding, Murder Tapes asks Advocate Kiroko Ndegwa what that is.
You say you are charged with a certain responsibility. As an engineer, you are required to give guidance to, say, a construction of a building, but you use substandard materials, and the building collapses on someone and that person dies. That would be one of the instances where, negligence homicide would emanate. Now, on the case you've just mentioned, that someone confesses to having identified people to kill someone. It is not to work with someone and work in a certain way that it is supposed to. He identifies people, hires them, pays them actually, even buys a murder weapon and identifies that the person they are supposed to kill. That is murder in the first degree, or what you ordinarily call it in the Kenyan context. It is murder with malice aforethought. This is someone who sat down, conceived the aspect of killing someone, and even facilitated it and saw it through. He might not have been the one who hit him, but who hit the victim. But he's the one who was coordinating the events.
The Florence Mushemi court failed to see through the criminal before it. It was Mahinda who traveled to Embu to hire Eddie and Raphael. It was Mahinda who paid their lunch. It was Mahinda who showed them their target, Daniel. It was Mahinda who bought them the murder weapons. It was Mahinda who drove them to their waiting place. It was Mahinda they called when the job was done. It was Mahinda who brought them the 100,000 Kenya shillings in cash. It was Mahinda who dropped them in Nyeri to proceed to Embu. And if it was not for Mahinda's confession, they may have never been caught.
So it's quite unfortunate, but unfortunately now, the prosecution under the Constitution has immense powers. They have immense powers to commence, discontinue any prosecution. They can take away one charge and replace it with another if it's going to help them achieve an even higher goal. And in this case, that is what happened. Set a thief to catch a thief. Set up Mahinda, let him get we'd rather have Mahinda, as I had said earlier, we'd rather have Mahinda have a slap on the wrist if it will guarantee that we will get the actual perpetrators. So it is unfair. Heck, it shouldn't have happened as it did, but it did, unfortunately. And that's just how the game is, for lack of a better word. Yeah. Because Mahinda, in my view, is a true mastermind in all this. He's the one with the many moving parts. He's the one allegedly getting instructions from the senior. He's the one who is procuring Warutuma to help him look for 2 able-bodied men to go and finish the job. White, if you remove Mahinda from the equation, none of this would probably have happened.
To the prosecution and the court, Mahinda was guilty of negligent homicide, that he only failed to stop the crime. But to the murder tapes investigations team, Mahinda was a principal offender. The murder of Daniel Wangondu was planned, facilitated, and executed by James Mahinda. To sentence him to 1 year in prison was not just an insult to the family of the late Mwangi, it is a threat to the rule of law. James Mahinda is now free and walking among the family members of Mwangi, a son whose murder he planned with precision. Yet nothing can ever take away the pain of the family and the stain of public opinion.
Without these 2 state witnesses, these 2 former accused turned state witnesses, Raphael and Eddie would probably have a different outcome today. Media will feed into whatever conversations are going on out there, because people will not talk about the hard facts and the hard evidence. They will want to talk about the juicy part of the story, that there's a wife involved here. He went back to his father-in-law's house, so he must have been snatched. There was an insurance policy involved. This fellow went and claimed the insurance policy weeks after his son died. So that's juicy, and I think that is what sells. That kind of news sells. But I think what you can do as media, in my view, is maybe ask the court to give you a media summary of exactly what happened, so that you're feeding from the judiciary, who actually have the file in question, the file that has all the facts and all the evidence, so as to avoid misreporting.
In this case, police told the media Daniel was killed for insurance money. They said his father wanted to inherit his wife. But in court, not a shred of evidence proved those claims at any stage of the prosecution. And yet, those words never faded. They became headlines. They shaped public opinion, and they left a family carrying a stain they could not wash away, even after Stephen Wangondu died in custody. This case leaves behind more than a murder. It forces us to ask hard questions. When police float theories without evidence, and the press amplifies them, who is really on trial? And what happens when truth is blurred with speculation? When police feed rumors into the media without proof, reputations are destroyed before facts are ever tested. In the court of public opinion, suspicion can be as damning as guilt. For Daniel, for Stephen, and for their family, the story will always be shadowed by what was said, not by what was proven. On the next episode of Murder Tapes, Stephen Wangondu is dead, and his multi-million shilling property is now the fight in a Nyeri court. It's not just his signature that is in dispute, but a lot more. I am Brian Obuya. Good evening.